If you have $1 million, are you in a position to retire? Well, it's tough to say, because as much as we like to focus on the size of our portfolio and how much we have in savings, that is just one aspect of a well thought out financial plan. So in today's video, we're going to walk through what are the other things that you need to think through so that you can tell, regardless of whether you have $1 million or some other number in your portfolio, are you in a good position to retire? Let's take a simple look at this to start. Assume you have $1 million in your portfolio and assume that you're invested in such a way that $1 million can generate 5% per year of income for you for the rest of your life. If we make those assumptions, that's $50,000 per year. So the question is $50,000 enough or not enough for you to be able to retire? Well, again, that's just one aspect of it. So let's work through some of these other things to see what else needs to be thought through to determine the answer to this question for you. Number one, the first thing that we need to think through are what are your expenses? If your expenses are less than $50,000 per year, it's a pretty straightforward answer. Your portfolio can generate $50,000 per year. Your expenses are less than $50,000 per year. Yes, your portfolio income can cover your expenses. You're in a good position to retire. But keep in mind how expenses might change in the future. Are expenses today less than $50,000? What about in the future? Are there extra healthcare costs? Do you want to spend more on travel? Are there other things that you want to make sure that you're doing? So make sure that you're looking at your expenses today and understanding, at least generally speaking, how those expenses will change over time. Now, maybe you're looking at this and saying, no, $50,000 is not enough for me to retire on. I have $1 million. It can create $50,000 per year for me, but I want to spend $70,000, $90,000, $150,000. Well, in those cases, you're clearly not in a position to retire just on your portfolio income. So start with understanding what your expenses are. Because once you understand your expenses, you can see how the income that can be created from your portfolio is either enough or not enough to cover those living expenses. The other thing that you have to consider is how's your 401k invested, or how's your portfolio invested, I should say. If your portfolio is invested and it's really just say all cash or all something that's extremely conservative, well, it might be able to generate income for you for those first several years of retirement. But if it's not getting any growth, you run the risk that portfolio will gradually decline over time until you've spent it down to nothing. On the other hand, if it's invested too aggressively or in something that's too speculative or something that just doesn't work out, well, same thing. It might be getting the growth needed until something happens. If the portfolio has a major downturn or if it doesn't do well, then it's not enough to ask, is it enough for me today? Really what we should be asking is it enough for me today, and will it be able to sustainably increase over time to continue covering my needs throughout retirement? The third thing that you need to think through is your other income sources. For most people in retirement, their portfolio isn't the only thing that they're going to be living on. Let's take a look at a basic example. Let's say you have two people. You have person A and person B. They both have $1 million in their investment portfolio, but person A has a pension that they're receiving. And let's say that pension is $50,000 per year, and person B doesn't have any pension or social security whatsoever. Well, even though they both have $1 million, and that $1 million could generate $50,000 per year, we're going to assume, person A is effectively living on twice as much as person B because they also have another $50,000 per year from their pension. So this portfolio is just designed to supplement the other income sources that you have. You have to keep in mind things like social security, things like pensions, things like other outside income sources. Maybe it's part-time work, maybe it's rental properties, maybe it's something else that you have going on, but you need to see what other income sources do you have that will help to cover those living expenses. One challenge sometimes that people run into is, let's say they retire at 60. Well, they're not eligible for Social Security yet. Social Security won't kick in until sometime between 62 and 70, so they have a portfolio today, and maybe they need to take out more on the front end, but then they'll take out less on the back end because Social Security will be covering some of their expenses, leaving less having to be covered by their portfolio. So when you understand your other income sources and the timing of when that income will stop or start, that helps you to determine how you can combine that income with your portfolio to see if your total income can cover the expenses you have throughout retirement. Now, the fourth factor here is risk tolerance. This goes back to how are you invested. If you are extremely conservative and if you don't like the ups and downs of the stock market, well, your portfolio, it's probably not going to grow as much as over time. It certainly won't grow as much over time. So we would need to adjust the expectations of how much that portfolio could sustainably generate for you if you don't like taking much, if any, risk at all in your portfolio. Compare that to another person who's maybe very comfortable with a good, prudently aggressive portfolio, prudent growth portfolio, where yes, there's some conservative aspects to it, but there's other aspects to it that are designed to outpace inflation over time. Both those people, same portfolio balances, are going to have different outcomes at the end of the day. So is $1 million enough to retire on? It's hard to say definitively. For many people, yes. For others, no. What it depends upon is what's your risk tolerance, how are you invested, what are your expenses, and what are your other income sources outside of just your portfolio. If this was helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this.